Hello and welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'll be reviewing the second episode of Vigilantes titled Take Off. You know the rules and so do I. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below and you will be read out in next week's show. Whilst you're down there, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wanted to do, because YouTube is an increasing area places small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now on to the review, and as we always do at the start of these reviews, let's start off with the positives. And I have to say that this particular episode was incredibly, well, action focused, and the action that we did get this week was quite honestly rather impressive. I will admit that I'm not really a manga reader. This is, I think, possibly the first manga that I've ever read, so actually seeing action in this kind of regard is actually really impressive and great for me to see. I did like the fact that with this particular manga, this particular edition of the manga, we got a chance for the artists to really flex their creative muscles and to show us some really great action sequences which felt like they've been really well shot. I know that I'm using air quotes a lot in this because, you know, this isn't strictly speaking an episode, but within the dialogue of the particular copy of the manga that I've got, it refers to it as being an episode. And you don't really shoot this stuff, but you get what I'm saying here. The actual action itself had a great fluidity to it, and at times it did feel like I was looking at the storyboards for an anime. Now, do bear in mind that I'm not saying that in a way that is dismissive, because this all looks fantastic. As I've said before, you could quite easily take great strands of this manga and then adapt it to an anime format. It would be incredibly easy to do so, and there's a great, once again, fluidity to the actions and the motions of our characters that it really does feel like you've just taken a screenshot of something that's in full flow, and it really had a great deal of spectacle to it all, but not in an overly indulgent way. But it certainly does feel like the action that we get in this particular episode is of a bigger scale than what we got in a relatively similar kind of time frame with the main series itself. Even though, of course, one could argue that this fight had a few echoes of Midori's fight with the big robot, but that's a whole of a discussion for a whole of a time. The action itself, again, was well shot, it was well presented, well directed, and there was a definite choreography to it that was really impressive. I'm just I will still always be that part in my mind that if this never gets an anime, I will always be disappointed by it, because it would be intensely easy to do so. It's just, you know what, I'm just going to start repeating myself, so let's move on. I did enjoy the fight between Eraserhead and Knuckle Duster. It was fun. It was great to see these two characters facing off against one another. Not only did it give us a better insight into the world itself, which I'll discuss ever so slightly shortly, but it's always good to see two characters with very different movesets and very different abilities facing off against one another. It was an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object. It was honestly really great to see, and it wasn't just a spectacle, it was also, like I say, allowing us to get a better insight into the nature of this world and the clear distinction between the heroes and the villains, from what definitely feels much more like a legal angle. If you can read between the lines of what the two characters are saying to one another, there does seem to be an air of resentment towards one another. Knuckle Duster resents the fact that the heroes really aren't around as much as they really should do, and seem to be more focused on the macro scale of being seen, having to be seen, more so than they are about getting their hands dirty and really getting in with the minutiae of even just what in other worlds is rather boring police work. Knuckle Duster, Crawler and Popstep looking for people dealing drugs isn't the kind of thing that's going to get you front page of the hero magazines as it would do in any other kind of scenario. It's not glamorous, it's not cool. So from their point of view, they are resentful that certain heroes seem to be unwilling to get their hands to it with all that. And with Eraserhead, you can get the distinct feeling that he resents the fact that the Vigilantes don't follow due process. Not because he himself wants to become some kind of maverick, I'm going to do things my way, but more so from the fact that it does feck things up from his point of view. You've got a bunch of cack-handed, very clumsy people that are, whilst they might be well-intentioned, they are ultimately going to end up hindering any kind of investigations that might be on the way right now. Who's to say that there isn't some hero or hero group currently investigating the stuff with Trigger right now, and Knuckle Duster and his band of knuckleheads going about and shaking people up to find out where the jugs are hidden is either going to result in people getting hurt, or it's going to result in those criminals going to ground and disappearing off into the night, and it's going to knacker up what any investigations that are going on. So I can see the different dynamic between the two groups. Whilst they are both ultimately forces for good, the way in which they do it, I can easily see there being pluses and negatives towards it. I think that the big bad villain for this one, we'll refer to him as the Salaryman from here on out. I enjoyed them for the most part. I did like the fact that they were kind of goofy. There was that moment in the fight towards the end of it where he's just playing with people like they're toys. And whilst it is silly, you know, I do feel that a little bit more could have been done with them. I mean, this is a giant threat in a literal and figurative sense. And I do feel that they could have done something more. He had a more of a dynamic fight going on here, because it just feels like a one-punch KO kind of a deal. And whilst I do understand that they are kind of limited in this regard, because you can't do the same kind of scales of mega destruction this early into this particular story and not within this particular time frame, because that itself would potentially damage the flow of future events in the My Hero Academia series. It does kind of make me scratch my head a little bit when you have giant villains like this and all they really deem to do as far as acts of mass destruction is maybe kick a car over. But with that said, there is an argument as to why they weren't doing that. I mean, we had this big bad guy playing with people like they're toys. So it kind of feels like it would be out of character for him to start smashing things about. He was incredibly protective of the toys that he had in his collection. Sure, you can make the argument that it was because he had Trigger within them, but there's also a part of me that thinks that the reason why they were as protective of them as they were was because they're also toys, and they might themselves also be a toy collector as well as a toy maker, and as such the idea of smashing stuff up doesn't really appeal to them. So when you have them playing around with the heroes and the cars and such like their toys, it also in my head kind of makes you think, well, they're not really the kind of person that's going to start smashing stuff up. They're just going to like bump things together and giggle to themselves, which I think kind of explains why they weren't just smashing stuff up left and right. On a more focused angle and to go into stuff that's got a little bit more weight to it on a thematic level, I did enjoy the fact that we got to know a little bit more about our lead even more so. We got a better insight into their life and who they really are. They are a university student, and I hope that we get to see a little bit more of that particular kind of angle. I would like to see how they end up balancing being a student as well as having the day job, or rather the night job, and now being a vigilante. That is a nice little traditional issue that superheroes have to balance with, so I'd like to see a little bit more of that within this particular manga, because it's something that just does not exist in the My Hero Academia world as a whole, or at least it certainly doesn't exist within the confines of the main series itself. And it is interesting to just see just how crappy his life really is. It's not a total nightmare, it's not quite on the same level of other characters we've seen in the main series, but it is relatably lame. Like, he seems to have missed the boat on becoming a hero. It seems to be that the implication therein is that you can only really become a hero via going through education. You can't really enter into the field after the fact. You can't really do it in taking a very late apprenticeship, as it were. Which is an interesting idea, because for a while now I've been wondering about doing a video asking, can someone without a quirk get into UA, and stuff like this. It does help me get a better idea as to how this world works, or at least how hero work works within Japan in this particular time period. And finally, I still feel that Knuckle Duster is a great character. In this particular episode of the manga, we learn that he doesn't have a quirk. His strength is that he's just really strong and really bloody minded. He is incredibly unsubtle. In my copy of the manga, there's a little like behind the scenes bit after each particular chapter or episode or whatever you want to call it, and it discusses how his inspiration is more from Batman than All Might's Superman is. And in that kind of paragraph, like, Knuckle Duster, like I say, is incredibly unsubtle. He just barges in to try and save the day and just get to the end point as quickly as possible. With All Might, there's always this feeling of he's playing to the crowd. He's playing to them and giving them something to be inspired by. Whereas Knuckle Duster, it's a lot more focused. He just has the end goal in mind. He wants to take Trigger off the streets one way or the other, and he's going to find it, goddammit, even if he makes himself look like a tit in the meantime, and even if you have to break a few eggs to get along to there. Like I said earlier on, there's a chance that his investigation stuff in a more realistic concept could possibly end up hindering an investigation more so than helping it, but he doesn't care. So long as he gets those drugs off the streets, that's why he's so interested in doing that. That's why he acts the way that he does. It's very unsubtle, but he wants to get the results. I will admit that last week I did predict that the drugs that he was looking for were going to be the stuff that the salaryman was selling. I will admit there was a part of me that was slightly disappointed by that, because I just wanted it be a case of him just looking for people that were just on any random drug. The fact it's specifically Trigger is a whole other thing. I don't know how I feel about that. I might discuss it at a later point, but with that said, let us now pivot into discussing the negatives. And there aren't that many, but I have to still feel as though I have to get into them, and I have to say first and foremost, I'm not exactly keen on the fact that it feels like the mystery has already been solved. Again, as I said previously, I knew that the salaryman was going to be the one dealing the drugs that they were looking for, but given the way that they were presented in the first episode, I had expected them to be a little bit more of a recurring villain, that we'd see them popping up from time to time, that Crawler and Knuckle Duster and Popstep would have all these little adventures, they'd fight these bad guys, and then the salaryman will come out the shadows saying, "Hey, it looks like you need a little pick-me-up. I got something you need." And the bad guy would take it, "Oh, suddenly they've got spikes coming out of their eyes. Ah!" And that would just be a recurring thing for the next arc or two. And that just didn't happen here. They got dealt with here and now. And to that end, I also thought that the spiky villain guy was also going to become a recurring villain, a recurring character. That we'd almost have a mirroring thing between him and Crawler, and that over the course of the next few episodes, the next few seasons, and possibly all the way to the end of it, they would be their villain equivalent. We'd see them going down a darker path, whilst Crawler themselves rises up into becoming a hero in some description, and that wasn't the case. They were both defeated after one episode. Now, to be fair, I think it's fair to say that doing it like this prevents it from becoming a recurring thing, that we're not dragging this out for weeks or months of story, and we're just using it here and now and getting it out of the way to help set the stage for the world itself. But with still that said, it does feel like what do you really do from this point out? I suppose it does keep things open, that it isn't quite as signposted. As I said last week, one of my big issues with that first episode was just how signposted everything was. In the first episode, we got a main character, which is understandable, but we also got the villain/love interest. We also got the mentor figure. It went out of its way to set the stall in a very deliberate, very no thrills kind of way, which I wasn't particularly keen on. So if we'd have kept going with this, yeah, the obvious thing would have been to have these two being recurring villains, and the fact that they haven't done it is something as a version of it. So I do have to credit it for at least wanting to set its stall out so it has more room to go later on, but I don't know, we'll see where we go with this. How do I put this? I'm not confused as to where we're going with all of this. I do know that the end result, at least of this quote-unquote season, is Crawler getting an understanding of how to be a vigilante and how to be a hero. So it's not like they have nothing to work with here. It's just I was expecting a little bit more of something to bounce off as far as the story is concerned, if you understand what I'm meaning. Like, we'd have a little more of a deliberate plot thread, because right now it still feels like we're very much in the establishment phase. We're establishing everything about the characters and the world and the kind of things that they're dealing with, but it's not sure which of those things is going to be the big recurring threat down the line. Is there going to be a recurring villain? Is there going to be a recurring big bad that they ultimately have to defeat once all this is said and done? I don't know. We'll probably find out over the next few weeks or so. I imagine so, but we'll soon see about all that. So, now to get into the overview, this is another fine episode. This is another fine edition of the manga. It really does all the action with a great deal of flair and dynamism to it. I can't really fault it for many reasons, because there's not much to fault with it. Like I say, I am disappointed that two characters that I thought were going to be the recurring villains ultimately didn't turn out to be. But with that said, they might well be. We really don't know. We are literally 2 episodes into this. Maybe they come the big bad, maybe come the rivals, who knows. But, you know, it's not likely we don't have anything going forward. Trigger is still going to be out on the streets, and we still have the whole mentor-mentee dynamic between Knuckle Duster and Crawler, and we'll see where all that goes. With all that said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! Now it's time for Comment Corner. Just a quick apology if I've sounded a little bit out of sorts over the course of this review. It's a very warm day, I'm a little bit dehydrated, but whatever, we'll continue on. Our first comment comes from Big X1, who asks, not had a chance to check out Vigilantes work yet. Is it worth picking it up or waiting for an anime? And to pretty much echo what I said in the comment section, I think it's honestly a case of so far so good. I did enjoy the first episode, I've enjoyed the second episode. So in that kind of point of view, yeah, it has a good batting average. I'd probably leave it a little while personally before I decided whether or not it's worth getting into or not. But again, so far so good. But something I think that does need to be underlined before I inadvertently find myself as being the source of some kind of big rumbling rumour is the fact that we don't know for certain if there is going to be an anime of Vigilantes or not. Personally, as I've said in the past, I think that it would be leaving money on the table if they didn't, because quite frankly, it really does lend itself well to the art concept of an anime. The target demographic for My Hero Academia is going to be approaching the kind of age that Crawler is in this particular anime, so they would probably relate to them a little bit more. So if you want to look in that regard, it would make sense to go for something like that. And quite simply, My Hero Academia is big business. You know, I think that having a sequel series, or in this case a prequel series, would be a great idea, and because it's pretty much done and dusted at this point, they don't have to wait on putting anything on hiatus. They can just keep running with this for the next 2 or 3 years, and then maybe do a sequel to My Hero Academia. Ultimately, that's up to the creator themselves, but still, for here and now, I think it's good. I'm not sure if I can recommend it outright, because this anime, this manga stuff, it's bloody expensive, but still, we'll see how we do in another 3 or 4 episodes' time. Our next comment comes from Soilboiled2616, who says, Crawler is greater than Deku. Thanks for the comment, and I will be honest, it is a case of, well, we'll soon see about that, because, well, quite frankly, I'm only 2 episodes into this, so I can't really say as to who's better than who, but I will say that Crawler certainly has more personality than Midoriya has in most recent series. That's not to give anything away for anyone who haven't got that quite that far yet in the anime yet, but with that said, you know, I do feel that Crawler in these past couple episodes has had a little bit more personality than Midoriya has more recently in the anime. I know that there is a lot of discussion as to the quality of Midoriya as a protagonist, and whilst I do appreciate those discussions, I can't say I agree with some of them, but that's a whole other discussion for all of a time. And with Nice Guy / the Crawler, it is an interesting change of pace to get someone with a very different outlook on heroes than Midoriya. We will be interested to see where they go with this. I think that at the end of the day, this is going to feel a little bit more closer to what certain audiences were hoping My Hero Academia was going to be, more so than what it turned out to be, but we'll soon see about that. Anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching. I will be doing another one of these next week. I will admit I was planning to do something very different for this week, but hey ho, that's just the way that it is. We are getting closer to our 100th My Hero Academia special. What that's going to be, you'll soon find out. But anyway, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!